Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience to help shape your knowledge of the industry. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts today are Carol Tallon and myself, Bryan Fox.
Okay, thank you, Bryan. As mentioned last week, we have a special Smart Cities episode this week, which we're very excited about. But before we get started, we'll just take a look at some of the big property stories of the week. So firstly, housing prices in the capital rose slightly in the first quarter of the year, so they're up 0.33%, and most recent reports are suggesting that home buyers in Dublin are paying up to 129,000 more to live near a Dart or Lewis stop. Also, according to the Banking Federation, mortgage drawdowns are up 8.9% in the first 3 months of the year. And the build-to-rent boom continues, with An Bord Pleanála receiving planning applications for close to 4,000 apartments since the start of the year. And these are from some of Ireland's best-known developers with a combined value of 1.6 billion.
And a 9-storey tower is being proposed to sit alongside the 35 luxury homes that have already been developed on the former Smurfit Print Works site on Botanic Road in Glasnevin. Also, the co-living trend continues, with Barty Capital applying for planning for a 208-unit development in O'Leary. And finally, the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund is to put €140 million into the Irish Residential Property Fund.
Okay, so our first guest in studio today to kick off the Smart Cities episode could be none other than Jamie Cudden, Smart City Programme Manager with the Dublin City Council. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. So you might just start by explaining to people what is the Smart City concept?
Yeah, so thank you. It's great to be here today. So delighted to have a special on Smart Cities. It's something I get very excited about. Essentially, like, what we do is we look at all the opportunities in terms of new technology trends. I mean, I'm holding my mobile phone here. Everyone's got these very powerful computers on their using them every day, and can do amazingly powerful things with them. But we look at, like, you hear all these buzzwords like Internet of Things and big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, 3D, VR, AR. It's kind of it all sounds a bit kind of nebulous, but really what we're trying to do from a city perspective is think about how do we take some of these trends, apply them in a city context, and deliver better services, better outcomes for citizens, and new economic opportunities for Dublin. So essentially, that's what smart cities are about. And what we see is data-driven cities where you can make better decisions.
And can you give us just an example of something, because you've mentioned a whole range of technologies there, and sometimes there's an element of a novelty factor, but I know that you guys are involved in actually trialling some of these, and you've completed some trials, so you might just give us an example of one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do hear these words like Internet of Things, and I always like kind of explaining it in terms of you start connecting people and buildings and infrastructure and cars and whatever in the city, you start generating all this data, and then using that data you can help make better decisions on the city. So some really good projects that we've developed on Internet of Things would be looking at some of the challenges we face in the city. For example, extreme weather events. So can you imagine being able to understand where the rainfall is hitting hardest across the city in real time, or where the river levels are increasing in rivers in real time? So putting in really sensor networks that measure this, and then being able to pull that data together and then push that out to our council workers that can respond quicker to the problem areas, and of course for citizens to understand where the issues are quicker. I think that's the real essence of smart city, and that cuts across whether it's understanding where the congestion is quicker, that you can make better decisions in terms of what to avoid, where to go, where not to go through your mobile phone, through Google Maps, etc. So it's all about data and using that data to make better decisions.
And obviously the power of this is that it's real time, so it can actually be actionable for decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us, on our phone, on our way into work or wherever, you're looking at Google Maps to look at the real time data, where to go, where not to go. I mean, we've all transformed, I guess, our daily life, looking at the the real time information in terms of when the next bus is. I mean, that's really. I was
just going to put that to you.
It's really changed. Yeah.
I use GPS around the city, even though I know the route, but I do it because I know that the GPS will tell me straight away if there's an accident or if there's a delay or something like that. So I use it purely to speed up my route around the city. Jamie, I saw online there that Smart Docklands actually came first in the FDI Intelligence Smart Locations. Now that's a global. Is that European or global?
Global, yeah.
That's amazing. And I tell you, the reason I came across it is because you bet out Vilnius in Lithuania. Now, that's an area that I have an interest in because that's the PropTech test bed. Now, globally, that's the PropTech test bed. So actually, for Smart Docklands to edge out Vilnius on this criteria is pretty amazing. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I guess, it's about 3 or 4 years ago, we were kind of setting up our Smart City programme, which has great backing from, I suppose, Owen Keegan, who's our chief executive, which makes a big difference. But we were kind of trying to fast track deployments of new technologies and new opportunities. And, Dublin City, while it's a small city internationally, we kind of felt like, concentrating innovation across a district could be a good first step to really get people, touch and feel and understand the technology. Docklands also, massive redevelopment. I think it's 3 billion worth of investment at the moment. World-leading tech companies, Google, 8,000 staff, all the global leaders in one place. Huge investment in infrastructure and, the fibre, all the things that make smart cities. And we partnered with Connect, a Centre for Future Networks, and Trinity, and we brought together all the key tech companies, and it was about 4 years ago, and we kind of had a conversation like, guys, why do you have to travel everywhere in the world to do innovation? Why couldn't you just do it on your doorstep in Dublin? And from the city council perspective, it was like, well, we can play a role bringing it all together, bringing the universities, bringing the tech companies, bringing the startups, and actually letting them test and put stuff on the streets of Dublin. And we just kind of worked away, I suppose, fast-tracking projects, everything from, environmental monitoring to the flooding projects, looking at smart cycling projects where we catch data on how people cycle around the city, where the potholes are. And it just engaging with the property developers, that was a big one as well, like the Hibernia REITs, the iPuts. These are the guys, that are kind of really starting to look at embracing the technology, and we were helping them understand where the global trends are, and bringing all that together over the last 3 to 4 years, and branding in our Smart Docklands, partnering with companies like Google, SoftBank, MasterCard, IBM, Intel. It's just come together, and now we're recognised globally as a success story, and we feel we're only at the start of that journey. We're only this technology is going to really take off, and we really want to position Dublin as a global leader, and make sure that the big tech companies
and I suppose the financial banks and all that are recognise the fact now that you're highly competitive in relation to smart cities as well, within the financial district, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about cities and economic competitiveness, and think about talent attraction. The city has to be pulling in the right direction to make sure that we position Ireland as an innovation island, a tech hub. Dublin, Docklands, Silicon Docks. We have to walk the talk.
Jamie, when we talk about smart cities and smart and computers and all that sort of stuff, from the point of view of an outsider and from the point of view of someone that has an interest in it, you always hear the term hacking. Oh, yeah. Is there a danger at all of the Dublin City Council's computers being hacked and the lights switched out and everything like that and so forth? Is there much of a danger of that?
Yeah, I mean, as we know with technology, we hear a lot about autonomous shuttles and cars and self-driving vehicles. I mean, hacking is the biggest concern that people have in any of this. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, none of us are invincible, so you have to take all sorts of precautions. Sure. At the moment, I'd say we're at the very early stages of smart cities and a lot of these new technologies, but certainly cybersecurity is absolutely first and foremost. Well, yeah. As is data privacy and data ethics. We've seen the whole what's happening with the big tech worlds and Facebooks and others, but we have to be careful and considerate in terms of what we do with people's data and how we make sure that at the end of the day it's about benefiting the citizen, because we hear a lot about data, the new oil, data monetization, this and that, but the reality of smart cities is it should first and foremost deliver better outcomes for citizens, and if it can generate revenue opportunity as well, great, but we have to make sure we get that balance right. Yeah.
And the other story is too, of course, that you've heard in the UK this last week, this controversy about Huawei becoming part of the 5G infrastructure for the UK. How do you see 5G working in Dublin?
Yeah, so I mean 5G again is another one to get quite excited about. I mean the next generation of mobile networks. Yes. Really high capacity, low latency, so you can deliver new applications like self-driving cars or connected drones, or even that augmented reality experience on mobile devices, and being able to cater for large numbers of people in one location. So you can imagine a football match, or Euro 2020, for example, where you have huge crowds in Dublin. So we've actually built one of the world's first 5G test beds in Docklands.
Okay.
Working with a company called Densar Ireland and SoftBank in Japan. And so we're learning a lot about how you build those networks. At the moment, we're not using any Chinese technology in that network, but of course, I mean, we're following closely the concerns and maybe the geopolitics that's behind some of those.
What sort of feedback are you getting now? Because I mean, it's the next step, really, isn't it? And it's going to be a huge advancement too in terms of computer technology as well. What sort of feedback is it? Positive feedback you're getting now from the?
I think we're just building the network, I guess, at the moment, and understanding how you build these things, and how you put stuff up on poles and how you optimize it, and interesting, like big glass buildings, really struggle to get connectivity from 5G. And that's a lot of the new modern buildings. So how do you overcome some of those problems? But for cities, it's like if all the operators build their 5G networks at the same time, we won't have enough space to put like things on lampposts and street assets. So we're trying to look at unique kind of approaches in terms of how could they share infrastructure, and how can the city facilitate that type of sharing to give a kind of a cleaner installation, and hopefully bring down the costs for the operators, because the problem is that the mobile operators don't make much money, because it's all the services on top, the WhatsApp, the Facebook. That's where all the money's made, the advertising on that. I suppose mobile operators are more like utility companies these days. I mean, it's an essential service, but they need to figure out how they pay for the infrastructure. And for cities, we need to figure out how we can enable that, because we absolutely want Dublin and Ireland to be at the forefront of these new innovations and to build new products and services that can scale.
It's interesting. I actually had a conversation with a large-scale property owner very recently, and he saw the emergence of 5G technology, and particularly the fact that there needs to be so many points and masts, that he saw that as potential revenue for landowners and for property owners and building owners, that instead of one mast that would service a whole area, he suggested that you might need a mast on different buildings, or perhaps even inside on different floors within buildings. Is it likely, you've just described the providers really as utility providers, is it likely that they're going to pay to position those on buildings and properties? Yeah,
I mean, one of the key components of what the experiment is that we're doing is looking at what's the business model behind building these networks. Really, really complicated, because the bandwidth or the frequency of spectrum that we're looking at requires a lot more sites and locations. I think the reality is that it's not going to be a massive lucrative revenue opportunity for building owners. I think what you will find is they will want to have this type of connectivity to be competitive, and it's
to
about
meet their tenants' needs.
Yeah, to meet their tenants' needs, to meet the needs of the city and the services that cities need to deliver. So I think there's going to be a much more balanced conversation in terms of, well, what's the fair transaction price in a way that we all win and benefit. Because to remember, like a lot of these operators, they spend a lot of money on 4G spectrum. They'll spend probably a lot of money on 5G spectrum. They probably haven't even made their money back on the on the 4G spectrum. So I suppose we need a bit more be a bit more sensible on all of this, because if we look at just the national picture in terms of broadband, you can see sometimes if we don't all work together, you can end up with certain parts of the cities being covered, other parts maybe not being, this cherry picking of locations. And I think what we don't want to see is this digital divide kind of.
And that's absolutely happening at the moment. And in fact, I think it's something that people outside of Dublin aren't aware of, that there are digital black spots within the capital as well. So just in relation to Smart Docklands, because it's an area of the city, I mean, I've heard you describe it before. Is it the most connected square mile of
2 square kilometres?
2 square kilometres, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we use the word, it's one of the most connected 2 square kilometres in the world, and we use that on multiple levels. I mean, one thing that makes us very unique in Dublin is the connectivity just we have between people, companies and the city, and startups and researchers. So we're very connected as a society. Also then the connectivity, we have all sorts of types of connectivity networks there, from emerging low power type networks to 4G, 5G. So I guess we use it on multiple levels, the most connected district in the world, and it's really taking off. The the whole smart Docklands, the economic opportunity, and we're just delighted to be able to facilitate that.
Well, it really illustrates what an amazing job Dublin City Council, and of course by extension Smart Dublin and Smart Docklands, has done to pull all this together, because there's so many different players and that we're considering here. But I want to turn our attention maybe to the community element of it. So I can see how a lot of the smart city solutions would cater to occupiers and people coming into the district to work. But do we know what proportion are residential, full-time residential within the Docklands, and what will smart city initiatives mean for them?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the key parts of the programme is an engagement aspect where equally we work with property developers and we work with tech companies, but communities are a core part to that. Docklands is really interesting in terms of just the transition from an old kind of docks, high levels of deprivation to now a global leading tech quarter. So we have quite a mix, like the old, communities in around Pearse Street, around the docks, around Sheriff Street, and then you've Grings End as well, and then you've got the whole new, the Google tech workers. And it's interesting, like, while it's great to have the success of the tech workers, the old areas would actually feel there's a bit of resistance towards the encroachment in terms of all these new jobs announcements and new, like, Salesforce Tower and other things happening there. So we partner with university researchers and we have workshops looking at how can this benefit local communities, because at the end of the day, like, smart cities is about looking at looking at the quality of the environment. So with a lot of construction, I know some of the speakers you have later talking about how can you use smart technologies to measure, the air quality, the looking at noise, and I think so by putting these technologies in, you can kind of help communities, have a voice with some evidence, and I think we're really looking into that, but also we're deploying like Wi-Fi networks in community facilities and making sure like that they have a say in future planning decisions around the district by investing in a full 3D model where we hope to bring in the whole kind of VR, AR, augmented reality.
That's actually really exciting, and it's definitely something, before we let you go today, it's definitely something that I want to talk to you about. The hackathon that's taking place the weekend of the 10th of May.
Next Friday.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Please do tell our listeners, because this is something that I've communicated with my PropTech Ireland hat on. It's something I've communicated out to innovators. But actually, I know that there's a wider audience there of innovators who actually would be able to use this, because you mentioned data there, but what's very unique here is that you're making all of this open for a set period of time, so open source, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean the 3D model, I mean we through our kind of collaboration and engagement across the developers and working with like Sanama and others, we kind of realised that there was a lot of 3D models built across the district, and we took the opportunity to kind of pull it all together and to actually open source a highly accurate model of the district, because we kind of realised that if we want to drive innovation, you need to be proactive and you need to invest, but also there's so many applications on 3D models, from the whole gaming. We saw some articles on our 3D model about zombies in Docklands, what games could you create, to kind of, well, if you're putting a new tower like any type of tower in the Docklands, what impact will it have on the viewpoints, on the shadow analysis, and can you bring people into an immersive kind of technology environment where they put headsets on, or mixed reality, or they're looking at their phone, what does this new building look like, all down to property tech as well. So looking at, if you designed a building from scratch using the latest digital technologies, it can drive down costs, be more sustainable in the long run. So I think there's so many different ways that you can use this, and we're just happy to be part of a kind of opening it up and creating the opportunity, open sourcing it. And we have a huge hack Friday the 10th in 1 Mimmel Lane, which is Hibernia Reate, with Autodesk.
And that's one of the most fabulous buildings within the Docklands.
Stunning. And it's called Town Hall as well, actually. So the whole idea of that space was to bring communities together. So we have developers, we have leading academics, we have industry professionals, and you guys are PropTech Ireland are very much part of that. We've Dublin Port now on board, and it's just I think the future of planning as well is a really interesting piece. So looking at how you can bring together communities, because when you look at the drawings of new plans, it doesn't mean anything until you actually see what it actually really looks like.
Yeah, and that's something that that's a drum that I beat quite a lot here in terms of helping people through the public consultation and the pre-planning public consultation to actually visualise or experience the proposed development through immersive technology. So it's amazing that you've made this 3D model of the city available for people, or this part of the city available for innovators to plug into. So exciting times, Jamie.
Yeah, exciting times, and I'm sure a lot more to discuss in the future. Again, Jamie, I hope to see you in here again. That was Jamie Cudden, Smart City Programme Manager. And thank you very much indeed, Jamie. Now stay tuned. After the break, we have Gavin Gallagher of PropTech TV and Paul McDonald, Managing Director of Sonitus Systems.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Bryan Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio, email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Now, as mentioned before the break, our next guest in the studio today is my fill-in, Gavin Gallagher of PropTech TV, and Paul McDonald, Managing Director of Sonitus Systems. I think I got Sonitus correct. Sonitus.
Yes, there's a big debate outside of it.
Okay, so how have I done? Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys. Gavin, we'll talk to you first. Talk to us a bit about international smart city solutions.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was just reading about this earlier today, and I've been reading about Hong Kong. Actually, Hong Kong it's trying to position. It's got a lot of ambitions for smart cities, and obviously huge cities like that have massive populations and stuff. That's where you're going to see the most attention, I think, to this kind of thing, because when you've got such a huge population density, things like smart cities, any smart solution at all is going to, in terms of, say, for example, public transport and stuff like that, like just the efficiencies and things like that. Smart cities is all about that, And
how does it make it efficient? Just a matter of interest, Gavin.
Well, if you've got like a sensor system that's there, it can just transmit data to people's phones and stuff like that far more efficiently.
Okay.
I mean, we've all gotten used to now, if you put something into your Google, it'll tell you how long it'll take to get to such and such a place, because it knows traffic, volumes and all that. Well, this is just going to get far, far more accurate, and you'll actually be like, I find now that Google Maps, for example, when I was coming here today, Carol, I was looking at my watch going, I knew I had to leave when I had to leave to make it on time, and sure enough, I was exactly on time.
I actually just made the point earlier in the last slot that actually I use GPS around the city, even though I know my way around the city. It's because I want to see, I want to be able to preempt any delays and get there faster, which actually says a lot about our modern society as well.
This public transport intrigues me. Does the system in Hong Kong then, is it a much more improved system than Dublin Bus, say, uses here? Or
well, I mean, the thing is it's just their ambitions or what they have at the moment and what their ambitions are two different things. But obviously, with 5G coming in, for example, the amount of data that can be pushed down now to people's phones and things like that is just going to completely transform. And when you're walking through shopping centres, for example, you'll actually have kind of offers that are coming up on your phone based on you walking past it. You've just walked past a shop and all of it.
Which I personally find incredibly invasive and annoying. But anyway, so look, also in studio with us today is Paul. And Paul, your company is already delivering a smart city solution, isn't that correct?
Yes, that's right. Actually, we've been working with Dublin City Council for at least 10 years. We were spin out from Trinity College, a research group there in acoustics, and the City Council approached us quite a long time ago and asked us, could we develop a solution for noise monitoring around the city.
On construction sites?
Not necessarily on construction, but originally to help them just gauge the environmental quality around the city. They had a small team of 2 people. They didn't have the resources to measure all over the city, and they didn't have the technology to do it either. It was far too expensive, and we developed a piece of instrumentation to allow them to do that in an automated way. So it was a more efficient data collection system.
Just noise right across the board? Right
across the board. There's about 50 traffic, monitoring sites. It's environmental noise from traffic, from rail, from air transport and so on was their initial focus. And what it allowed them to do was take more efficient measurements. But about 10 years ago, what they were doing was publishing an annual report, a PDF report that was available through the website. They would crunch all that data and publish it at the end of the year. And the way it's developed now and what we've built for them only just recently, with our first sale yesterday.
Congratulations.
Is an automated platform, a smart platform to allow councils and local authorities to process all that data, all that environmental data, and publish it online in a way that's easy to grasp for the general public. So we have automated software tools now to do that. And now it's called big data and it's called smart cities and IoT, but it started from a platform that we built 10 years ago to try and help them manage that with a small team.
And are there international standards to reduce noise level to a certain minimum? Or
yes, there's a European Environmental Noise Directive, which was the genesis of all this. The City Council were pushed to assess and then treat environmental noise to improve the noise quality around the city. And Dublin actually were quite progressive in the way they approached that they wanted to take a monitoring approach where they had a real network of real data that they could communicate to people and then make better planning decisions or better environmental decisions based on that, such as protecting areas that were relatively quiet in the city. So on foot of the measuring system that they implemented, they were able to designate 8 quiet areas around the city that they now protect in their planning from higher noise levels.
And that was just as a result of the data that came from your system?
Absolutely. So it's a nice example of how a smart system or an IoT system can help a city council make better decisions. It's not necessarily that they're improving the existing quality, but they are able to identify areas that are of civic value and public amenity and protect them as they make their decisions.
So therefore reducing noise pollution, obviously.
Exactly, yeah.
And all this monitoring is real time?
All real time, so we have...
Can the public access that?
Yes, there's a public website now called dublincitynoise.ie, and it's all the measurement data is live and available, and we have just finished building our new smart city tools that we'll be launching to replace that site over the coming weeks.
So from the point of view of the public, what's their feedback in relation to the aspect of noise they find most irritating?
I suppose what we look at is the difference between environmental noise, which is long term and things cities can plan for and develop for, versus neighbour noise or nuisance noise, and that comes from barking dogs and neighbours having parties and so on, and it's a constant struggle for local authorities. But what we help them do is, with an automated monitoring system, is something they can move around quite easily. They can put it in one location for a week to assess a noise complaint. All 4 of the Dublin councils are quite good at this now, and they've developed their own expertise as well to help citizens engage. And what we deliver for them is some tools to allow them to tackle very technical concepts in an easier way, that it's automated measurement, automated upload and automated data analysis, and something they can then communicate to the general public or to the residents that they're dealing with in a way that makes it easy to understand and easy to access that information.
That's excellent. Thank you, Paul. We were just speaking with our last guest, Jamie Cudden of Smart Docklands, just how this is relevant and how it's improving the daily lives of citizens. So that's a great example of that. Gavin, while I know you're here with your PropTech TV hat on, your day job is managing the comings and goings of 8,000 employees that come through the gates of East Point Business Park.
Right.
So would noise be a concern that you guys would have?
Well, noise is not so much of an issue except when there is any kind of construction going on. So we have various restrictions on things like, for example, you can't use a Kango hammer during office hours and things like that, because in a concrete building the noise transfer would be too huge. So those kind of things, less so. We're located right beside the Dublin Port Tunnel, and because of that there's quite a bit of noise coming off of that, but because it's at the toll plaza it's not so bad, because trucks are starting and stopping, I guess. But noise isn't so much an issue, but we do sort of see, sensors and things like that as hugely beneficial. But
taking it beyond noise, am I right, Paul, in suggesting that you guys are also doing environmental monitoring and dust monitoring and
that's right,
other concerns?
We've just launched an air quality product as well that is targeted at local authorities, at property managers, to allow them to gauge the air quality around the area, which is much more of a topical issue, certainly for residents or citizens that are concerned about air quality. So we have taken what we've learned with our noise measurement about automated data collection, simple communicational tools, and we've applied that to air quality monitoring as well. So our new system is noise and air quality to allow people to gauge the overall environmental quality.
So
I can see a use for that, actually, yeah.
Absolutely. So do you guys provide the software and the hardware?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So it's a full a complete solution for local authorities nationwide.
It is, yeah. And one of the things that Dublin found attractive for their smart city initiatives was that it's almost an off-the-shelf solution. We have hardware, we have experience, we manufacture it ourselves, so we have a lot of control over what it does and how it does it, and we have teams in place that can actually go and install these things that have boots and tools in the back of their cars. We can get them installed, and then we operate all the software systems as well. So it's something that they can easily install and operate with our support, and it's a full solution for them to gauge environmental quality.
Okay, because I'm just thinking this would be, issues that have come up in the recent past, like for example Croke Park, when concerts were cancelled. Was it last year or the year before? And because of residents' complaints. So is that the kind of thing, is noise monitoring happening in entertainment spots at the moment?
Absolutely, and more and more often. In fact, we have a monitoring site outside Croke Park that allows the events management team there to view live results, live noise results, and make sure that they're compliant with their music licensing. They use it for concerts, but also for corporate events at Christmas time when everybody's holding their parties in there, and they keep an eye on that, and it allows them to engage with the residents with real data and monitor in real time.
So again, the residents all have access to this information in real time.
It gives the Croke Park team some tools to generate reports to show compliance, and to deal with the city council. So it's an online system for relationship management, and that's one of the things we found much more now where we operate on construction sites or commercial premises, that this type of instrumentation is now being used to manage relationships. It's the tool that they can use. I was just going to put
that to you. I mean, is it a case where if a big construction was to take place in Dublin City somewhere, the people behind the construction would coordinate with Dublin City Council to figure out what the times and so forth they can use, as Gavin was saying, jackhammers, etc. Or would that be a factor in it?
It's certainly where that's heading. The core of our business at the moment would be construction monitoring. Okay. So all the major contractors and major projects would have noise, dust, vibration monitoring.
Right. Yes,
that would have live instrumentation to make sure that they're compliant with their planning conditions.
Yeah.
And they would submit maybe a report weekly or monthly to the council. But what the council are now looking at doing is bringing those tools online to have live compliance monitoring right across all the sites, so that the contractors would be able to connect their instrumentation to a centralised platform.
See, you'd imagine that would be great for residents, because I remember when like for infrastructure projects, I just remember the outcry from residents around the Docklands, around the Basin area, when the Lewis line was going in and the construction was happening at hours. I think that particular project had exempted hours, so they could work outside of normal construction hours, and it was causing huge disturbance to the residents at weekends. And so I know that noise monitoring was probably one of the areas where the project teams and the residents came to blows because of it.
Absolutely. Now, I should say we were doing all the monitoring on that project as well. So the project team did have a noise monitoring system in place. It was something that allowed them to gauge their compliance. But what we've seen more, I think that was the first large public project that we won maybe 5-6 years ago. And it was actually what pushed us to move out of the university and to form into a full-time company. And what we see now, though, is that contractors and developers are using these systems as tools to manage those relationships, where initially they were keeping the data maybe a little bit private, engaging when they were asked for information. Now they see it as an online tool that allows them to engage with local residents, engage with the city, and manage those relationships.
Do most cities have this type of facility now at this point for monitoring sound, monitoring noise?
A lot of cities would have research engaged in this type of area. They would have trialled it, but Dublin is ahead of the game in the way they treat particularly noise and getting into the air quality system.
Gavin, if I could just go back to you just for one moment, because you mentioned Hong Kong there being a prime user of smart cities and so forth. Is the fact that Dublin is such a small city, would that be a major factor in terms of being a prime?
Well, it's funny you say that. I've been thinking about. I've been talking to some people about Dublin as a market, and obviously everyone talks about London as a kind of a place to go because of the size of it and stuff. But the reality is, if you're rolling out a product, if you're like a startup or something like that, Dublin is actually, it's a great size market to actually test, and then because it's local, you're local to the market. Then you can go into the UK and you can actually kind of sell out.
I hear this all the time, and I suppose again from a PropTech point of view, I would always hold the view that actually yes, it's a small manageable marketplace, but it's a very difficult market to get into to test. So for example, we have large scale property managers, and it can be quite difficult for startups and innovators to get access to it. And in fact, that's one of the things that Dublin City Council is doing through its Smart City programme, that it's actually rolling out. So a little bit like Paul, you mentioned that your business rolled out from Trinity, but you were able to do that through the local authorities. And it's so powerful to have an avenue where startups need, when they're market ready, that they're actually able to get in, test their systems and then roll into the market. And Dublin hasn't always been the best place for that. So I think Smart
I was just reading earlier
changing
today about Arcadis is a company in Holland that is in Amsterdam, that they're doing in a smart cities innovation hub. And the idea is it's like an accelerator. So they've chosen 10 companies to go in and to do this stuff, and they give them a stipend of 20,000. And so it's a good, that's the kind of encouragement that you really need to kind of get some of these startups up and running.
Yeah, well, actually, I might just pop, just before we go to break, I might just pop my PropTech Ireland hat on again for just a moment to say that Leading Cities, which is a global organisation based out of Boston, they've actually opened applications for their post-accelerator competition, and that's a global competition for market-ready innovators to roll out their solutions to local authorities and to cities globally. So I was delighted last year to be invited to be an international judge, and again this year. And I think it's worth noting that our esteemed former Taoiseach, Enda Kenny, he was appointed to the Leading Cities board back in 2017, so they definitely appreciate an Irish voice. So if there are any smart city innovators listening in, I would definitely send them to the leadingcities.org website, maybe see that open competition and see if it's something that's relevant for them.
Gavin Gallagher, PropTech TV, and Paul McDonald, Managing Director of Sonitus Systems. Thanks so much indeed. Next, after a quick break, it's Alex Gibson, Assistant Head of School of Marketing and Technological University, Dublin, and Andrew Farrell, CEO and founder of Block Angel.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So as mentioned before the break, we have Alex Gibson. Alex is Assistant Head of the School of Marketing and Technological University Dublin, and Andrew Farrell, CEO and founder of Block Angel. Alex has been on the programme before.
No, Andrew's been on the programme
Excuse me,
before.
Andrew's been on the programme, excuse me. Good to see both of you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So why don't we start with you, Andrew, tenant communications and management of building issues. We've discussed this before in the past. Could you elaborate a bit more now on what we've discussed?
Now, you see, Andrew, what he means is now we've learned so much today from our previous guests about smart cities. Now you can tell us how your communications tool for tenants actually ties in to the smart cities concept.
For people who didn't listen to the last show I was on, just just give you a brief rundown. So Block Angel, it's a communication and maintenance management tool basically that's used by block management companies, and we're in about 50 blocks now in Dublin, and
that's amazing.
Our mobile app is basically a front end, and if you're a tenant or if you're an owner occupier, you'll have access to this mobile app, and really it's about getting direct communication between management and people who live in multi-unit buildings. It's got instant messaging. There's building information library that the management can populate with all sorts of content. There's then a maintenance ticketing system, and then on the admin side that the managers use, there's a whole system basically of they bring in their suppliers and they can convert those requests into requests for quotes and work orders and all that kind of stuff. So it's a complete solution from when you raise a ticket as an occupant of a building to when that's finally closed out and all the bits and pieces that have to happen in between, the permissions and all that stuff. So
basically speaking, what you're saying is you're ahead of the pack in relation to smart cities.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. The smart cities, obviously it's a huge spectrum of stuff that's going on in IoT.
Well, in relation to your own area?
In relation to my own area, I mean, well, I suppose we're a front end. The mobile app is a front end, and the web app for the directors of the owners management companies and the members is a front end as well. And when you talk about IoT and people talk about having an app and a software to analyze the data and all this kind of stuff, there is, I suppose, from my own opinion, there's a risk of like having too many platforms, and everyone has so many logins for different things these days that where I can kind of see the IoT piece happening is, having plugins to things like the Block Angel mobile app. So, and I'm starting to have these discussions now with some of these IoT kind of innovators in the space, and a lot of the customers that I have and that I speak to are also looking in this direction as well. So, things are moving in this direction for sure.
But is the trend really more about engagement, as in it's more how people want to receive? So tenants in building blocks, they no longer want to be reading notice boards. They want access to information in a format that suits them. Again, sometimes I think that when we look at some of these innovations, the platform is purely the tool, but it's actually responding to how tenants want to live. It's how we live now. It's how we expect to consume information. It's how we expect to be advised of changes coming up, and that ties into the whole concept of smart cities is responding to how we live now and how we want to live in the future. And this is just an extension of that. It really is responding to people's on-demand lifestyle. Well, I suppose with all these technologies and I suppose the progress in technology has all been end user led. So it's really considering who's the end user of this product or service and how do we best service them, and that's what drives a lot of this innovation in IoT and all the smart city stuff. And it's what drove Block Angel. I mean, we went out to design a CRM, maintenance management and communication tool that's end user focused. And this area of property and property management in particular has been very underserved by this kind of end user service. So it's a great opportunity for us, and looking at the ecosystem of IoT, it's a great opportunity we see now to collaborate with some of these IoT innovators to bring these tools to enhance people's experiences in property and living where they are in these multi-unit environments. Which is absolutely on trend, and it's what people are looking for at the moment. And speaking of what people are looking for, I'm so delighted that you're with us today, Alex, because you're the man behind the ARVR Innovate conference. That's coming up next month on the 10th of May.
That's right, it's coming up on Friday the 10th of May, so it's the 6th running of it in Dublin. So certainly the AR and VR space is very dynamic at the moment. There's a lot of interest. It's a conference that's grown very well. It's one of the largest in Europe now. We've got a lot of international delegates as well as Irish delegates coming to it. And I suppose one of the things I've noticed more and more in recent years is just the interest that there is in exhibitors as well as the speakers. There's actually, it's a type of conference, I think, where people, they want to get hands-on. It's one of those conferences where there's just a lot of cool stuff to try, whether they're VR headsets or augmented reality headsets and
geeks.
So if you want to be transported to an alternate reality, that's not going to intoxicate you too much. I think it's a great place to go, and you'll learn a lot as well.
In terms then of the day job, I mean, you're obviously got a very responsible job as being assistant head of school of marketing, which is obviously. What's the awareness among young people now of the whole tech world? I'm sure they're well advanced now at this point in time.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that says these technologies in particular, there's more familiarity and more exposure to them, that's for sure. Particularly virtual reality. I think augmented reality for most people is still a bit of a mystery, even though a lot of the people actually use it on a daily basis, younger audiences.
Well,
and they don't call it AR, but that's what they're using. For example, Snapchat, Facebook, when people go on to use the Facebook lens and they put on a funny wig, a virtual wig, etc., that is augmented reality. So I think the terminology can be confusing sometimes, but there's certainly among younger people a lot of recognition. But my own academic research actually has shown that among the over 65 age group, there was actually the greatest enthusiasm about virtual reality for tourism promotion. We did some academic research looking at the Wild Atlantic Way.
But let me ask,
really?
Yeah, and it was the older audiences who loved it most.
Now that's interesting because actually there's a very forward-thinking Irish entrepreneur and PropTech tech entrepreneur Ronan O'Boyle, who's based in London. And I saw on social media recently he shared that his mum went over to visit, and so he decided to treat her to a virtual reality experience. In 45 minutes he came back and found an empty chair and discovered that she'd left after a few minutes. And basically the motion sickness, there were things that it was really interesting, because as an innovator of VR products, it gave him another insight into users that he hadn't realised before. And I thought that was a very powerful way to find out years into your career. That,
well, you've made a really important point, which listen to Andrew as well. I think they said that, with all of these things with the smart city technology, we need to be careful that we're not a slave to the technology. At the end of the day, it has to be led by the consumer, the user, what they want, what they get utility, what they get value out of, and what makes their life easier and or more entertaining. That's what we're all looking for.
Novelty factor though counts, doesn't it? Because I know there were so many use cases for virtual reality and augmented reality, particularly across the planning, construction and property industries that I'm involved in, and it's something that I feel really passionate about, and we have our own tech team in-house developing. But actually, sometimes the use cases are not what excite people, and actually the novelty factor, we're still in a phase where the novelty factor sells. And
yes, absolutely. And there are some apps that have capture people's imagination, like IKEA. Some people may be familiar with that one, where you can download the app and you can see a piece of furniture in your own home and resize it by just touching the screen. So things like that have caught people's imagination. But I think you're right, though. Actually, the real opportunities, the commercial opportunities, are probably a little bit more mundane. Whether it's allowing architects to show concepts in a more engaging way to clients, that's where there's a lot of opportunity. Or in manufacturing, in terms of improving the manufacturing process. Maybe not that glamorous, but actually all the forecasts that I see, all the forecasts I see in at my conference in terms of who are the exhibitors and where's the interest, it's all around the industrial engineering, manufacturing mainly. A bit of tourism as well. You're seeing interest as well.
There might actually be some political interest as well, because we did hear a whisper that in the upcoming elections there will be a politician using augmented reality as part of the
they
campaign.
Will get my vote, okay? They will get my vote.
They'll get my vote too.
Because I'm waiting for a long time for it to be more popular.
My next question, actually, I suppose, is very much self-explanatory. But for listeners that don't know about you, the Technological University, is that exclusively just a technological university?
Well, the TU Dublin Technological University is formerly DIT, so people will be familiar with DIT, of course. The university status was granted in January, so it was a big important factor for education landscape in Ireland generally. We're building the largest educational campus at the moment in Grangegarman. It's upwards of €1 billion over a 10-year construction. So talking about construction property, it's one of the very biggest construction projects in the city at the moment. There will be more than 20,000 students on that one site in Grangegarman when it's fitted out completely. But beyond that, yes, university focus on applied knowledge around the technical disciplines in the main, and certainly we think that having a university status, in fact we're seeing it, and I'm seeing it in my current role even today, interviewing international students who are coming to us who said last year they would not have done so, but now that we're a university, it makes it an easier currency.
There is a lot of we know internationally too, there's a lot of competition now within universities as well. Do you find that pretty intense at the moment, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's government policy to substantially increase the number of international students, and that's partly to address the funding gap as well. Universities, so that's definitely a factor, but it's also, I think, a factor in terms of building capacity and interest in Ireland as a destination for investment. So there's a whole range of dimensions to that. We'd like to think that there's scope, given the plans and the objectives, for all the universities to succeed and flourish. Of course, there's an element of competition in these things, but Education Ireland, which is the government-sponsored body, acts in a cohesive way. So I have been on overseas trade missions to India, for example, and in the same room as me, promoting Ireland. We put on the Irish jersey, let's be honest, and we're promoting Ireland, and some candidates may be better suited to other universities, and we're happy with that once we're growing the appeal of Ireland generally.
And have we got a good standard abroad, would you say? Are we well recognised as a university country?
That's a good question. I think that in some markets there's growing recognition of Ireland. Certainly in China, they've been well-established markets, although it's such a huge market to kind of get your mind around where to target. Growing markets for Ireland in the next number of years will be markets like Indonesia, for example, is a big growth market, and it's a 200 million population, vast middle class, growing very quickly. I think there's a lot of growth potential in India as well.
The African countries as well.
Yeah, and one thing we're noticing, Andrew, is that there's a growing recognition, particularly in India and Indonesia. There is an awareness that Britain's leaving the European Union, so we're seeing a bit of a spike from candidates who are saying we want to come to Ireland rather than the UK.
And offering a smart campus, I'd imagine, would be another sort of tool that would be used to attract people to come to TU over other campuses. For example, if they're going, particularly if they're going to be living on campus as well, with the student accommodation that's being provided there in Grangegorman. So, is there any plans for to have smart?
Well, we have a digital transformation team at director level, so I'm not au fait with all the plans around that, but there's certainly it is a priority to do that. I think you're right. The opportunity is there when you're in a new build situation to sort of put the infrastructure in place initially. So you're right. I think we should be doing more in that way. We do in the university. We have an Open Labs by TU Dublin Hothouse, which is doing a lot of great work in terms of building links with industry around core technologies, including AR and VR. So we have a new AR and VR development hub, which is being really successful. There's a lot of demand for their services, and I'm involved in some projects in that space.
It's a very impressive building. I've been in it before. That was a collaboration between Enterprise Ireland and TU, isn't it?
That's on the Grangegorman site. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the first new building there, actually.
Our previous guest, Paul McDonald from Sonitus Systems, actually showcases the importance of academic support and then rolling that out into the marketplace, because they were a spin-out from Trinity. So it just shows that, I don't think we can get away with operating in silos the way we have in the past. We do need the academic institutes to support the startups, but we also need a mechanism where those startups are actually rolled out, or they get assistance to roll into the marketplace when they're market ready. And I think maybe that's the piece that's been slightly missing, because Ireland doesn't have the same VC environment that other countries do, and that's definitely a problem. And I think when we're pitching Ireland as a startup nation, somehow we leave out the bit about us not having a very well developed VC market, and it's a huge lack in the infrastructure. I mean, where does that gap? Who steps in to fill that?
Yeah, well, look, I don't know. Many people have pointed out. Donald Slattery, CEO of Avalon, was talking about it there last week. He has ideas about how Enterprise Ireland should be rejigged, how funding should be rejigged. But one of his messages was that there needs to be more collaboration between industry and startups. Looking, I suppose, the topic of this evening is smart cities. The guys in Smart Docklands, I think, act as a really good cohesive kind of point for startups and industry and people around the city to be able to do that. Yeah, and they actually they bring together these large property occupiers and property or asset managers and allow access for innovators, market-ready innovators, to roll out their services. Now, that's massively valuable. And in fact, that's probably why they were ranked in terms of smart locations. They were ranked number one in the world, ahead of Vilnius, which is the PropTech test bed. So that was really interesting. I have a global market. So there's definitely no underestimating what the Smart Docklands and Smart Dublin team are doing in terms of supporting and rolling out. But I'm not sure if that helps in terms of the VC side of things. And part of the argument is, do we just have the appetite? Do private investors have the appetite to invest in innovators in such a small marketplace? Yeah, and one of the other things that Donald Slattery was talking about was leveraging the diaspora around the world. So, getting capital from the States and Canada and places where, people with Irish links have access to equity, and linking that in with Irish startups. So I think that's a really good initiative that should be explored for sure. Yeah.
And diaspora are pretty active, aren't they? And pretty knowledgeable of what's going on in here in Ireland as well, particularly those that have left numinous from universities, etc.
Yeah, I think Andrew's right. I think the alumni network is an area that the universities are trying to harness that. It's probably
take a more American approach to it.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe more could be done in that area beyond the sort of the networking and getting to know each other. Is a bit more hard nosed maybe in terms of trying to connect people a bit more. But I think first of all you have to
we haven't
develop.
Got that.
I think first of all you have to develop the
alumni
alumni strength and network. And as you said, there's a cultural dimension to a lot of this. I think in the United States it's hot wired into people that you give back. When you make it, you give back. And we have great philanthropists in Ireland too, but probably not. It's probably not part of the DNA the same way it is in the US.
I have to agree with you completely, Alex. Okay, that was Alex Gibson, Assistant Head of School of Marketing in the Technological University in Dublin, and Andrew Farrell, CEO and founder of Block Angel. Thank you both for joining us. That's it from us today in the studio. Thank you for joining us on Property Matters, the show where property matters.
Okay, and we want to thank all of our guests today. This was our busiest lineup so far. We dedicated the whole 60 minutes to smart cities because we feel it's so important, and we would love for the community now to get active and research some of these initiatives. So next week we'll be joined by the Zoobox Ireland team, and that's another great innovator coming into the Irish marketplace. But for now, thanks to Shane Flynn, who was on sound, producer Katie Tallon, and we're back at the same time next week. Stay tuned for Bowl of Soul, which is coming up next. So from Bryan Fox and myself, Carol Tallon, have a good week.